today I'm here at the Roman Baths in Bath with the collections assistant, Zosia. Do you mind pronouncing your last name?
It's Matyjaszkiewicz, it's a bit of a long one.
Yeah, I don't want to mess it up for you. So we're actually going to be discussing Roman curses. I think this is such an interesting topic and not a topic I don't know too much about, so I'm really excited to learn some more. Can you just provide a little bit of background information about the baths, about the curses, anything you can really?
Yeah, sure. So the Roman baths are in Bath, and the reason that they're here is because there's a natural spring right in the middle of the city. So it's a hot spring, it's the only hot spring in the whole of the UK, and it comes up at 46 degrees right in the centre of the city.
Right.
So the Romans, when they got here, they saw this hot water, and I think
perfect.
Yeah, they're probably pretty relieved. If you think about the guys up at Vindolanda writing letters asking for socks, then they're probably pretty keen.
We struck gold with this one.
So the first thing that they do is recognise that the water's probably sacred. It's probably going to be sort of land of the gods. In fact, it's likely that this was worshipped before the Romans got here.
Right, okay.
We've got some evidence of that. There's some Iron Age coins that are thrown into the spring, so that's by the British people who were here before the Romans got here. And then the Romans basically take advantage of that, and they build a temple associated with the spring. But they also think hot water, bathhouse.
Yeah, perfect.
So they build a whole bathhouse and a series of kind of rooms to do with that and things like that. Dating's quite hard because we don't have anything that specifically dates the site. It was found. There's evidence of it that's found in the 1700s, so they don't record things in the same way that we do. And we can say that the Romans probably got here quite early after they came to Britain in AD 42. And they're here for about 300 years.
Okay.
So if we go to the curse tablets, this is all to do with worship at the spring.
Right.
So you have like the sacred spring in the middle of the complex, and then you've got the sort of Roman baths side of it, which is the bathing part, and then you've got the spring building, which sits over the spring, and a temple next to it. Okay. So there's these kind of two chunks, the temple and the baths, that are linked by the spring. So you go and worship at the temple, and the goddess that they worship at the temple is called Sulis Minerva. So Sulis, we think, is the name of the Celtic goddess who was here, the Iron Age British goddess that was here before the Romans got here, and they've mashed it together with Minerva, who's a Roman goddess. Yeah. So from that you can kind of think they've probably got some traits in common. Like to think that they were both women. You'd like to think that they're both sort of warrior goddesses in some way. And you worship her at the temple, but also they worshipped her at the spring, and they did this by throwing things into the spring. So there's tens of thousands of coins across the whole Roman period that are thrown into the spring. There's boxes and boxes and boxes of these. We've got loads on display. There's loads of objects that are thrown in, personal items like jewellery and things, but also plates and bowls and stuff that they use in the temple. But also there's these curse tablets.
Brilliant.
So it's 130 of them.
Wow.
That we found so far. So we know there's definitely going to be more stuff in there because we haven't dug the whole thing out, and the best thing for archaeology really is to leave it where it is these days. But yes, there's 130 of them, and the majority of them were found in the 1980s. And that's when a man named Barry Cunliffe came and dug here. And the reason they did that is because they were a bit worried about the foundations of the pump room. So they had a look at what was going on under the spring, and they found all this amazing Roman stuff.
What a find.
Yeah.
I know, it's crazy, isn't it? Because it's not just this amazing site that is found, but all the things you were saying, all the coins, these curse tablets and bowls and all these things, it's just brilliant. It's treasure trove.
And one of the things for me is quite exciting as an archaeologist is there's a bit of a running joke where the idea of ritual is a bit of a laughable thing sometimes, where if you didn't understand something, then maybe it was ritual, maybe it was religious. And I've always been a bit of a skeptic because, whatever you do, you're putting your own experiences on what you're looking at, right? So I've always been a bit of a skeptic, and then I came here and I was like, oh yeah, okay, so they worship Sulis Minerva, right? What's the evidence here? And they've just written it on everything. There's 130 curse tablets with her name on. There's loads of stuff in the temple with her name on. There's even the pots and pans, they scratch her name into it. You get these letters, DSM, which is like Dea Sulis Minerva, which is to the goddess. Off it goes.
Well, it's nice to actually have some confirmation. Because a lot of the time I think it's like, it could be this, it could be that. It's nice to actually have some solid, definite things.
And the great thing about that as well, the really exciting thing about that is it's a representation of this goddess who was here as well before the Romans. And before the Romans, you don't have written history. It's oral history. You just tell each other stories. You remember what's happened. And they didn't write anything down. So the way that we remember, or the way that we know what they were doing or who they were worshipping, is through the representation of Sulis here.
Right. Yeah.
And it's great that the Romans have kept that on, because they're respecting her existence, but also it tells us a little bit, like a tantalizing glimpse of what was here before.
A little snippet. Yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
So these actual curses, what were they written on? What kind of material? Were they always kind of the same? What were they like, really? I don't really know what to envision, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, I have a few.
Okay, great.
But first off, they're all made of lead or pewter, which is a mixture of lead and tin. And they use this for like a number of reasons. So first off, it's pretty practical.
Yeah.
So the way that they write onto it is by scratching into the surface.
Okay.
And then if you're going to throw it into water, a piece of paper isn't really that like physical, it's not really tangible enough.
Yeah.
You can watch a piece of paper melt away on the water.
Yeah.
So it makes more sense for it to be something that you're passing on. You know that message is getting there. But also lead is really, really heavy. So one of the ways you can tell lead when you find it on an excavation is it's the heaviest metal,
right?
Apart from gold, but you never find gold in the same quantities. So it's this idea of it being heavy, and it's like the weight of death. So it's like the weight of a body and the cold touch of the metal as well. It's almost like a kind of dead object.
Yeah, quite metaphorical, really.
Yeah. And that way of communicating with the goddess is by throwing it into the water, and the water is like this space through which you can communicate to another world.
Like a liminal portal type.
Perfect. Yeah. It's that exact thing, and this idea of using material that kind of resonates with that world, it makes total sense, because you're taking something that's already dead. And then with other examples of other things, like some of the coins, we have them that are cut, and the idea is you're killing that object and throwing it into the water, so then it passes into this land of the gods. So some of them are quite chunky, quite heavy, but a lot of them are really thin sheets of lead, and they scratch into the surface. And one of the things when you look at them, you've got to bear in mind is that writing would have really stood out when they first scratched into it. So it would have been like a bright sort of silvery colour, whereas now it's all sort of the patina, so when the metal's corroded a bit, it goes blacker. So it's a bit harder to make out now. So it would have been this bright writing, but of course you don't want everybody to see what you're writing, especially if you're like writing someone's name and they're right next to you. So they'd roll them up or fold them and then throw them into the water. So I've brought out some examples today.
Brilliant.
One of them's unfolded, one of them's a heavy blob, and then one of them's still folded up, so you can see what they were like.
Okay, amazing. Thank you. So these are the curses here. This is quite exciting to me. So you've got 3 here, so can you just explain like what the differences are in each one?
Yeah, definitely. So this one is a classic example, a lot like the ones that we've got on display. So this has been unrolled, so it's a nice thin sheet of lead, and if you look at it in the light, you can see there's these little scratches in the surface of it. So the scratches are this inscription, so it would have been like really obvious at the time, but now it's a little bit harder to make out. This is a really classic one actually, because this is a theft of a hooded cloak.
Really?
Yes, and we've got 7 thefts of hooded cloaks in our 130
this
from the
is
Roman
a regular occurrence.
Yeah. It's almost like, I don't know, it's almost like losing your umbrella, I feel. It becomes a bit of a running joke, I think. So the curses all like this, in that they have this inscription that sort of follows almost like a formula, where it says, to Minerva, here's what's happened, and this is what I'd like to kind of come out of it. And the majority of them are like petty thefts. It's all sort of quite small stuff, all kind of everyday objects. There's no examples of anything violent. There's no examples of robberies. There's no examples of anybody complaining about something that is a really serious thing. It's all sort of little portable stuff that's been stolen. And the cloaks are really common. There's one example of a ploughshare, so that suggests that that's somebody who's a farmer. But a lot of them, like this, seem to be people who have come to the baths,
left all their stuff,
got changed, gone off, had their little bathe, come back to the changing room, and their cloak's gone.
And
so they've
I have to curse you.
straight to the spring to write this curse and throw it in. And they're all a little bit extreme, I'd have to say. So I think if you're cursing somebody, I'm not sure what you would write, but I'm not a particularly angry person. I'd probably be like, oh, please could I have it back? Thanks, you know. That'd be quite nice.
Yeah.
But these curses, this one, for example, says, he is not to buy back this gift unless with his own blood.
Okay, so revenge is the key theme here.
Very revenge.
Payback.
Definite payback. And the idea is that they're exacting the revenge through the object that has been lost. So I don't think a lot of them are expecting to get it back. The idea is that Minerva will use what that object is worth to make that person pay for it. And there's some that like may he, his family, his children never eat, sleep, or you know, anything ever again. And
these hidden cloaks are really important.
So yeah, they're sort of full of vitriol for the sort of thing that they are, for the smaller objects that they are. There's a lot of sort of like the repercussions are pretty big.
Yeah.
But then also, if you think about it, those objects probably would have meant a lot to those people.
Yeah, exactly.
Your cloak is going to cost you a lot of money. It's a big, important part of what you have. And then the other side of it is, like I said, the words we're using are formulaic. They're kind of style that everybody's writing in. You're always addressing it to Minerva. And there's always this phrase of whether man or woman, whether slave or free, that comes up in so many of them. So they're using these same kind of patterns over and over.
It's like almost chanting, like ritualistic.
And then it's the same with these kind of outcomes. There's so much to do with blood and exacting it. So they're obviously sort of following these patterns. And yeah, you do see that quite a lot in all of these curses. So that's the first one I've got to show you, and you can see again, if you sort of look at the way that the metal is bent, it has been unrolled, so it's almost got this kind of corrugated, and that's been unrolled by our conservators when these were first discovered, because if you don't unroll them, you can't see what's written inside. So I do have an example of one that is also rolled up. So this one's quite sweet. You can see it's literally just a lump. But if I turn it on its side, you can see where it's been folded over. And the reason that this one hasn't been unfolded is simply because it's too fragile. So in unrolling a lot of these, you're going to end up with the pieces coming apart, because you've got to remember you're unbending metal that's quite soft, and it's soft when it's folded, but it's become brittle over time. And it's a really, really sort of careful job that you have to do. So there are some that we don't actually know what's written inside of them, because we can't get into them. And obviously you can't x-ray them because it's lead. So maybe someday someone will be able to come up with a technique that can look through the lead, which would be pretty amazing. So that sort of shows you how a lot of them were found. And then the last one I've got is this one, which I affectionately call the blob curse. Because this is like, it's basically a cast off of pewter from somewhere. You can see it's just like a dribble that's stripped away from something that somebody's been working on. But the writing on this one's really clear.
I was gonna say.
You can see where it's inscribed into the surface. It's just a list of names.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And there are a lot that are like this as well, where because of the context and because they're curses, we know that this is somebody wanting revenge for something. It's definitely an angry action. So the list of names is probably a list of people that have wronged them. And we'll never know whether all of those people on the list have done something terrible and the person is asking Minerva to punish them all, or whether it's just one person on that list and they don't actually know who it was who did it. It's like a list of suspects. Yeah, definitely. So Minerva's almost treated like a sort of like detective. Like a detective or a policeman. Who's looking into this for them and dealing with it on their behalf, basically.
I think that's they're putting quite a lot of pressure on this goddess to say, sort this out. I know you've got millions of other people that are asking you to do this, but you've got to sort mine as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So these aren't exactly prayers, I guess. So does this fall under religion or magic, or is it kind of one of the same? What do you think?
Yeah, it's a weird one. So I think they are basically prayers.
Yeah.
But the way, because of that formula that they're written in, it's more like a kind of petition. So they're like almost like a legal document, and it goes through that sort of formula where they're using that kind of language and they're using these words, and it's very sort of formalized. So it definitely falls under religion because she's a goddess.
Yes.
But it does make you wonder, are they going to her about all these things because at this point in time the legal system, it hasn't developed enough for them to get proper punishment for these people? Or is it that the legal system is dealing with that tough stuff that we mentioned, you know, the ideas of robberies and murder and all the really dark things, because we don't see that in the curse tablets. So maybe
this kind of petty theft, for the actual legal system, they kind of thought, this is not worth our time, you have to go to Sulis Minerva.
Or maybe they thought that she'd deal with it better. So definitely a religious element, but also this kind of strange crossover where she, like you said, like she's a detective. And it's funny because it doesn't just show, it's like what we were saying about the bards, it doesn't just show this one aspect, it doesn't just give an insight into religion, it does give an insight into crime and the legal system and kind of vengeance in the ancient world. And your everyday people. These are the people who, I hesitate to say, would have been like you or me. I mean, I definitely wouldn't have been super wealthy. The sort of things that they're representing as having lost are just kind of your kind of everyday people, your shopkeepers. You've got, you know, like the farmer who lost his ploughshare and things like that, that they're going in, and this is a representation of the names of the people. They've got the names of the people that they're trying to punish. So that tells us a bit about who they are, and often they're sort of almost British names, some of them. And the sort of background in terms of the language that they're using shows us that they're not Romans. They're using sort of almost sort of spoken Latin. British so it tells us so much about these people, other than just the fact that they're kind of giving an offering or making a prayer. There's all this other little background going on.
Brilliant. So the site and the curse tablets, as we have discussed, give us an insight into so many different aspects of the ancient world. But what do you think is one of the most important kind of insights and details they give us? Maybe like insight into religion, the crime, the inner workings of everyday life, or the language. What do you think?
So definitely that idea of your everyday people. This is a representation of people that I think in archaeology you lose quite a lot, because if you haven't got wealth, you can't do a great big temple inscription. You can't, you know, you can't put an altar on the temple because you can't afford to. So these are everyday people, and although we don't know about the person who was writing the tablet, we've got the names of the people that they were writing about and things like that. But also, I mean, I said a little bit at the start that there is that tantalising glimpse into what was happening before the Romans got here. And there is a little bit of that crossover in the type of people who are writing them. So you've got this sort of spoken Latin that's being used here. You also have what we think are somebody who's paid to write the tablet. So it's not necessarily going to be every individual is writing the tablet. It might be someone who's paid to write it for you, because you can't write.
A professional one.
Definitely. And you can sort of see that in the handwriting and things like that. But one of the most exciting things is that we have a tablet that's written in British Celtic, in the language that was here before the Romans got here, which is just incredible, and it's the only example in the entire world.
I was going to say it must be quite a rarity, but it's very rare.
It's so rare that we don't know what it says, because there's no way to work out what the writing is, because there's nothing to compare it to. We don't know what the language is. So it's a huge mystery, and I love it because, again, it comes back to that whole idea of what was going on before the Romans got here. All we have are these little snippets, these little glimpses into what it might be. And one day, you know, evidence might come up, we might find out more, maybe someone else will find more examples of the writing. But for now, it's this little hint that there's so much going on that we still don't know about.
Hopefully one day we'll find out what's going on. Okay, so I have to ask, has there ever been kind of a follow-up from a curse tablet? Do we know if any stuff was ever returned, any belongings, or if anyone wrote another message to Sulis Minerva saying thank you for your help? Do we have any information about that?
I wish.
Wishful thinking.
Definitely. So definitely never the sort of positive side of it. The curse is such a sort of vengeful thing. We don't unfortunately have any nice messages. But you got to think about it in the way that this is done for a solid 200 years. You can't be doing this if you think it's not working.
Very good point.
So perhaps the goddess is exacting her revenge. But a lot of the ways in which that revenge is asked for is like through your physical health. And there is part of people that's coming to Bath for the water for a belief in healing properties as well. So if you're coming in and not very well anyway, and then you're a bit of an idiot and you steal someone's cloak, and then you get really sick, and you know, like it's known, people are writing cursed tablets, they're asking for the goddess to exact revenge on things like this. You're going to start getting this sort of creeping conscience feeling, and all of a sudden a cloak shows up on the steps of the temple, you know. But also that, you know, it would be announced that these things had happened, or that something would be stolen. You could also still speak to the legal system. So if you know that somebody's done that in Bath, and you sort of think, oh, actually, maybe they've spoken to the goddess, and I'm feeling a bit under the weather, or something's gone a little bit wrong.
Return this.
It's got to go back. So I'm sure there's got to be an element of it where perhaps Minerva wasn't doing any of it. Maybe it's all psychological. Because it's the psychology of the person who's writing, who's hearing about it, who's done the action, who's stolen something. You're going to get that creeping guilt. You might start to feel unwell. But also, it's the psychology of just doing it. It's like getting your feelings out there. And knowing
that people do write curse tablets, straight away you're going to be thinking,
definitely.
Someone's done it.
For the person who's suffering, you know, you've had something stolen. When was the last time that you were upset about something like that and you didn't tell somebody? Whether it's sort of telling your family or just ranting about it a little bit. Just a physical thing of writing it down on a bit of lead, scratching it into a bit of metal, and then throwing it into the spring to give to the goddess. You know, you've dealt with that. You can move on. So it's a sort of strong psychological thing. But 200 years of curses.
Yeah, it's like what people say about the healing sanctuaries. Like, do we know if they ever worked? And obviously there are inscriptions saying like, my leg mended itself and blah blah blah, but people wouldn't keep going back and back and back surely if it didn't work.
Precisely.
Maybe. Okay, and just kind of a final question, do you think we can see any either similarities or differences? Do you think that these objects clearly demonstrate a particular one side of it for the modern world?
Yeah, definitely. I think the cursed tablets in particular really feel like Twitter. It's such a direct access to someone.
Tag that person.
Tag them in. You're tagging Sulis Minerva and you're saying, hey, I'm annoyed about these things. It's like you miss your train's delayed in the morning, or it's cancelled, and straight away you're tweeting GWR, other train providers are available.
Hashtag really annoyed.
And you're literally saying, hi guys, and you vent your rage, and your train's still cancelled, it's still delayed, but you've done your angry tweet. It's like a part
of this kind of mini therapy, just to get it out and release that from your mind.
Definitely. So I think it does feel a lot like that. Obviously a lot more serious, but I think the
same kind of line. Love it. Thank you so much for this discussion. I found it really enlightening, really interesting. I think this is quite a nice little tantalising detail of the ancient world that you may not really know much about unless you're searching for it. So I think this has been a brilliant little fact-finding thing for me as well. Thank you so much for taking the time out to actually have a chat with me, and for showing me as well. That's been really interesting. So thank you very much.
Absolute pleasure.